Hi, folks, and welcome to Friday Focus, where we do not focus on what is seen, but on what is unseen. We're continuing our study of the Sermon on the Mount, and today we're going to be taking a look at biblical fasting. Jesus talked about fasting in his sermon. And we're hearing a lot about the benefits of fasting these days. People are encouraged to do what they call intermittent fasting, which takes several popular approaches. For example, there's alternate day fasting, where the individual eats normally for one day and either completely or partially fasts the next day. And then there's 5-2 fasting. The individual consumes a normal diet for 5 days of the week and then fasts for 2 days. Then there's daily time-restricted fasting. Eat as you normally would, but only eat within an 8-hour period each day. Now, the Mayo Clinic cites specific benefits of fasting, saying that it can improve your health. Some research suggests that intermittent fasting may be more beneficial than other diets for reducing inflammation and improving conditions associated with inflammation. Such conditions would be Alzheimer's disease, arthritis, asthma, multiple sclerosis, stroke. But what about biblical fasting? Why does Jesus touch on the subject in his Sermon on the Mount? Is fasting even mentioned in the Bible? Well, here's what Jesus had to say. He says, "And when you fast, don't make it obvious as the hypocrites do, for they try to look miserable and disheveled so people will admire them for their fasting. I tell you the truth, that is the only reward they will ever get. But when you fast, comb your hair, wash your face, then no one will notice that you are fasting except your Father, who knows what you do in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you." Matthew 6, verses 16 to 18. Now, it sounds a lot like when Jesus talked about giving. You give privately and you fast privately. So why was this a part of Christ's sermon? According to an individual, a Scottish biblical scholar named F.F. Bruce, the Pharisees typically fasted twice a week, Luke 18, verse 12. And it says twice a week in ordinary Pharisaic practice, Tuesday and Monday, the ascent and descent of Moses on Sinai. So that was the reason they did it. And they made a public spectacle of it. Again, it all comes back to the heart. So, what about biblical fasting? When you are fasting, keep it between you and God and not everybody else. The Bible mentions many people who fasted, including Moses, David, Daniel in the Old Testament, and in the New Testament there was Anna, Paul, and Jesus Christ who fasted. It was also a practice of many important figures in Christian history. Even today, many Christians continue to fast. Merriam-Webster, the dictionary people, defines fasting as to eat sparingly or abstain from some foods. Biblically, although this was the case, there were times when it wasn't about food. Traditionally, fasting was accomplished by abstention from all food, whether solid or liquid, except for water, and you can see that in 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 3. We also read in Scripture of a partial fast, where only certain foods were eaten and other foods not eaten, such as in the book of Daniel. As a trainee for the Babylonian court, he ate only vegetables and drank water, Daniel chapter 1, verse 12. At another time, he ate nothing and drank only water, and even fasted traditional grooming habits for 3 weeks, Daniel chapter 10, verses 2 and 3. The Bible also talks about an absolute fast where no food or water is consumed. It was a 3-day fast as a prelude to Esther's unannounced appearance before the king's court to plead for mercy for her people, the Jews. You can find that in Esther chapter 4, verse 16. Another unusual type of fast found in Exodus chapter 19, verse 15 is a sexual fast. While it is not called that, the people of Israel were to abstain from sexual relations for 3 days to prepare for their encounter with the Lord at Mount Sinai. Well, why would you fast? Why do we fast? Is fasting for the Christian mandatory? Well, those are valid questions. And allow me to answer the second one first. The short answer is no. Fasting's not mandatory. However, as we read through the scripture, we find that the biblical perspective is that it is a good, spiritually profitable, and beneficial practice. In Luke's book, The Acts of the Apostles, important decisions were prefaced by prayer and fasting. You find that in Acts chapter 13, verses 2 and 3, chapter 14, verse 23, in the book of Luke, chapter 2, verse 37, and also chapter 5, verse 33. If we consider the examples given to us in the scripture, I should conclude that prayer and fasting are vehicles by which we take our eyes off of the things, the mannerisms, the culture, the pursuits of this world, and we focus on God. The answer to the first question, however, is a little longer. The reason a Christian might fast is not to twist God's arm or to get him to respond according to our will. He's not a genie in a bottle to grant our every wish. It's not a my way or the highway tactic. Whatever type of fasting we may engage in, whether it be regular, partial, absolute, or sexual, or whatever, should be a way to put away the cares and issues of our life and make time to seek after God alone, with the blessings and benefits being secondary to God Himself. The believer who fasts makes him or herself look the part so that others will know that they are fasting and therefore will heap praise upon them. That's wrong. They will get exactly what they wanted. Most unfortunately, they will miss out on what God would have given them. According to David Martin Lloyd Jones, who was a Welsh Protestant minister and a medical doctor, he says the real problem with the hypocrite is self-interest. Ultimately, our only reason for pleasing men around us is that we may be pleased. The King James Version adds a final word to Matthew 6:18, and I like it because it is so much like our Father in heaven. It's the Greek word phaneros. According to the King James Version, what you do in secret, God will reward openly. This alone sets biblical fasting on a whole other level from what is seen in other religious and cultural practices. God honors those who honor Him. Everyone will see the blessing of God poured out upon you, even if they don't see the hard spiritual work that you put in. Although fasting may be going without physical food, the right motive can make it a spiritual feast. This is Dr. Vic Hollyfrin in His grace. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach me at vicsfridayfocus@gmail.com. That's vicsfridayfocus@gmail.com. God bless you and have a tremendous week.